Wonderful. We've got folks from all over, Cincinnati, Columbus, Cleveland. This is great. Keep it coming. So I will officially get us started. Hello, my name is Jocelyn Rosnick. I'm Policy Director for the ACLU of Ohio, and I'll be facilitating today's program. I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us today for a critical and timely discussion on ending the death penalty in Ohio once and for all. We are co-hosting today's program with Ohioans to Stop Executions, Represent Justice, and the Ohio Justice and Policy Center. So before we dive into the substance, I wanted to take care of a little bit of housekeeping. This program will last about 1 hour, so we will do our best to wrap up around 6 p.m. Additionally, this program is being recorded. We have over 220 registrants for tonight's program, which is really exciting. It also means that we could get a little bit crowded. So that means that everybody is on mute. However, we really do want you to engage with us and the entire panel today. So as we have our discussion, please feel free to add your comments and questions in the chat box below. We have staff that are going to be monitoring the chat room, and we will do our best to take care of those questions during Q&A towards the end of the program, and anything we don't get to, we will do our best to follow up after the fact. So let's frame the discussion. In the movie Just Mercy, Walter Mcmillian's case exemplifies everything that is wrong with the criminal legal system in the US and especially right here in Ohio. It's a system that fundamentally treats those who are rich and guilty much better than those who are poor and innocent, and it comes at a devastating cost. Today we're going to hear from Ohio's leading death penalty repeal advocates, as well as those who want to share their stories with us. We'll hear from Hannah Kubbins, State Director for Ohioans to Stop Executions, Kwame Ajamu, Board Chairman for Witness to Innocence, Mike Hartley, President of Swing State Strategies, as well as Tyra Patterson, Community Outreach Strategy Specialist with the Ohio Justice and Policy Center and Ambassador for Represent Justice. So with that, I'm going to toss the mic to Hannah to get us started.
Thanks, Jocelyn, and thank you everyone for being here tonight and wanting to have this conversation. I know we're living in a very heavy world right now, but it's my hope that this will be a more uplifting conversation or at least inspire you to take action, get involved, and make a change in the world. So I'm assuming most, if not all of you, have either read the book or seen the movie Just Mercy. If you haven't, I'm sure you'll still get something out of this conversation tonight. But if you haven't, do it. The movie in the sorry, I live on a busy street. I don't know if you heard that background noise. Aside from being incredibly informative about the criminal justice system and the death penalty, I think the book and the movie have a lot of lessons you can apply to your life every day, empathy, hope, tenacity, things like that. So the connection between the work I do as a director for an abolition organization, as well as the work that the other panelists do this evening to the film it's pretty clear to me, but I do want to focus on the story that the movie and the book is centered around, the case of Walter Mcmillian. So in meetings with legislators and constituents, the issue that's resonated the most with folks is how often we get it wrong. We know that humans are running the government and our criminal justice system and that we're fallible as humans. And Walter Mcmillian is just one example of hundreds of those who are wrongfully convicted in the criminal justice system overall. However, nationally, we just exonerated our 170th individual from death row, Kareem Johnson, from Pennsylvania. And nationally, we know that for every 9 executions, there's 1 exoneration. And in Ohio, that number is 1 in 6. Ohio is also home to 9 death row exonerees alone, one of which you will be hearing from in just a few moments. I'm going to give you a quick update on basically the state of the state and what the death penalty looks like in Ohio right now, and then pass the mic. So the last time Ohio executed someone was in July 2018. His name was Robert Van Hook. And since then, a lot has happened, and I'll try to keep this short. There was a hearing in 2018 that presented evidence surrounding problems with Ohio's lethal injection protocol, more specifically the drug midazolam. The evidence was showing that this drug is not a sedative, it does not render the individual insensate, it caused pulmonary edema in over 20 inmates, I believe, who were executed with this method. And that's not just in Ohio, they were from other states as well. And it also causes the individual to experience sensations akin to waterboarding, fire in the lungs, etc. So Governor DeWine saw this and he ordered ODRC, the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections, to find a new method because, quote, no one will be tortured to death on my watch, end quote. The state, to my knowledge, I'm not involved in the litigation sphere, has not found another method. I'm not sure what the progress is on that, and I'm not going to pretend to speak to that. But in 2019, we did have a pretty heavy execution schedule. There were 7 scheduled. None of them took place because of this ongoing lack of access to drugs. And 2020 has been the same situation with the most recent round of reprieves that Governor DeWine granted, I believe in June. There are no more for the rest of the year. So the amazing litigation that was done back in 2018 that presented all this information has allowed people in my position to gauge the appetite for repeal in both the legislature and the grassroots. Now, without getting too weeded, I will say that the response from legislators and constituents has made me very optimistic, and I firmly believe that it's not if, but when Ohio will get rid of its death penalty. To add to this momentum, in February, ACLU launched the Ohio chapter of conservatives concerned about the death penalty. One of its founding members is actually going to be speaking in a little bit too, Michael Hartley. The group also includes people like former Attorney General Jim Petro, former Congressman Pat Tiberi, Governor Bob Taft, current legislators, and so on. Because we're really seeing that getting rid of the death penalty is something everyone from both sides of the aisle and everyone in between can agree upon. And that's incredible to me knowing that we're living in a very divisive political climate. So in March, there was a bipartisan bill introduced in the Senate by Senators Nikki Antonio, who has long been a champion of this issue, and Senator Peggy Lehner. I don't know if Senator Antonio got on here, but if she did, I want to pass the mic to her as soon as I wrap up so she can speak to what's going on in the legislature, what she's hopeful for. And we do expect to see a bill in the fall in the House. However, if we happen to not get it done and passed this fall, it's not due to a lack of support. It's more of a timing issue. So we're fully prepared for the next General Assembly as well. There are a lot of other moving pieces that I've skipped over that I'm happy to speak to more specifically in the Q&A, but that's the short of it. And I'll just leave you with this before passing the mic. There are a lot of problems with the criminal justice system and with the death penalty. But something I've learned over the 3 years in my position, along with rewatching Just Mercy and rereading Just Mercy several times, is that along with the death penalty being indisputably irreparable as a government policy, we have to reckon with the fact that we're asking the state to kill citizens on our behalf, and that doesn't sit right with me. And I don't think it sits right with Ohio's values any longer. So with that, I don't know if Senator Antonio is on the call and she can speak to the work she's doing. If not, we'll pass it to Kwame next.
Can you hear me? You guys hear me? Great. Thank you so much for having me. The story of Walt Mcmillian is indeed intriguing, very educational, and for me, very emotional. I am the chairman of Witness to Innocence, which is the only organization of its kind on the planet. We are all former members of death row who are survivors of having been wrongfully incarcerated and sentenced as such. And so this makes us a very unique organization indeed. Walter Mcmillian's story is so emotional to me in that there are a few similarities in his own and mine, especially when he was in the cell speaking with his friend next door to him, and they were taking the deep breathing lessons. I could almost close my eyes and get very, very emotional with, there was a man next to me named Roger that used to do that to me as a kid. Unfortunately for me, I became an abolitionist at the tender age of 17 years old, as this is where all this started. May 19th of 1975, the tender age of 17 years old, myself, my brother, and my good friend was accosted by Cuyahoga County Cleveland Police arrested and charged with aggravated murder, attempted aggravated murder, and sentenced to die. I would be 18 years old when I decided that sentencing people to die in itself should have been unconstitutional, and that sentencing someone to die who was innocent was indeed an egregious atrocity to human life. I believe that because of these sentences, there have been so much mental illness and disparity in all human beings, not just at the top what death row is considered, but at the very least of just the person who stole a candy bar and was put into isolation. This is where this happens, where the human being is separated from the other human being. In 1975, there was a United States money order salesman who entered my neighborhood there at Fairhill and Cedar in Cleveland, Ohio. That would be the last moments of his life. He went into the fair cut rate store, and once he came out, he was robbed and killed. The proprietor's wife of the store, Anna Robinson, happened to look out the door and was herself shot in the neck. This would be a crucial happening with her being shot, in that in the courtroom, she would testify that I knew all three of these boys ever since they were young, and it's no way that they did it. I would know them if their back was turned, if they were running away, or if they was coming forward. So this was a very good element that we thought would be good for us, but to no avail. Because what happened was the coercion, and this is where things go bad with these cases. They used a child, younger than me, I was 17, they used a child who was 12 to lie and create the story against the three of us and ultimately send us to death row. I want you to know that in doing so, when I said it used a child, they actually perpetuated a lie to him first and then had him make the lie go public. His mother was in the hospital at the particular time, suffering from ovarian cancer, which she subsequently died from. And they told this 12-year-old kid that if he didn't go into the courtroom and say that myself, my brother, and my friend had committed this murder and this robbery, that they would go over to the hospital and take his mother and charge her with the perjury that they were trying to charge him with. And thus, he made the decision to save his mother and you know, do the dirty deed against us. This took 39 years to unveil. 28 years of my life I spent incarcerated as an innocent man. Now, I want you to know that the worst thing you can do to a person who is innocent is put them amongst people who are not. The death row for me was tragedy. It was trauma. It was a torment that, well, all of my great aunts and uncles and my grandparents passed away while I was on death row. My nephew, my older brother, my older sister while I was incarcerated. All of the loss that came to me can never be replaced by physical things or monies. All because I was 17 years old, believed in a system that didn't believe and support me. I'd like to get back to you guys doing the question and answer sequence. I know that you like to ask the 17-year-old kid a lot of things, like especially how did you go on to become the chairman of an international national organization that fights the very ills that put you where you was at, and that's part of it. Thank you so much for hearing me. I will be back. At this time, I would like to pass this microphone to Michael Headley. If he's there.
I'm here. I assume you guys can hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you, Kwame, very much. So my name is Michael Hartley, and I'm a conservative Republican. I always start things out that way, and people kind of look at me like I have 9 heads. So my journey is actually it's very familiar, as I've found out. So I started. I've been a political operative for about 25 years. Worked on Republican campaigns from city council all the way up to the president of the United States. And when I started, and for most of my career in life, I've been pro-death penalty. I started, my first kind of big job, I guess, was with then Attorney General Betty Montgomery. And in 1999, when the death penalty was reinstituted, and I got to see firsthand, being on the executive floor, what occurred with the Attorney General, who, for lack of a better term, executes the execution. I saw how it affected her, and it made me think, but didn't change my mind. So fast forward through a number of different races and office holders, and got to, I was a deputy campaign manager for Governor John Kasich during his campaign, and subsequently ended up on the executive floor there, part of his senior staff. And in 2011 was what they say in the room for one of the executions, and got to see how it affected a man of deep faith to carry an execution out. And that really planted in my head, why are we doing this? But didn't change my mind yet. Somewhere between then and now, so 2011 to now, and probably about 3 or 4 years ago, I really just, as a journey of faith, unceremoniously, to nobody's information other than my own, changed my position on the death penalty, because my faith told me, I believe I am pro-life. I believe I'm pro-life from conception to natural death. And so with that, I just kind of went about my business. I do a lot of work in criminal justice, bail reform, larger criminal justice issues, juvenile justice. And I happened to meet about a year ago, almost exactly, Hannah Kubbins at an event. We started talking, and I was very impressed with her, and said, you know what, I want to help. It's not a client. I'm just a volunteer. I just wanted to help the cause. And over the last year, that's been, the things that I've realized, and we've had a ton of different meetings and conversations with elected officials, policymakers. Let me give you a little bit of background on conservatives. Usually it's all a journey for them. At some point, most of them tended to be pro-death penalty. And it starts with either their faith, a fiscal argument of cost, which we know, which is when people realize the cost differential and the savings that can occur. It's I know it's just numbers, but it matters. Or that government can't deliver the mail, and they shouldn't be in the business of executing human beings. Basically, a libertarian argument. Also, we got to see the concern about innocence. As we talk, as you heard from Kwame, they often agree with the injustice of it, and the innocence issue. And my whole point of being part of this is to let you know that this repeal effort has significant bipartisan support, as Hannah Kubbins mentioned. And I too believe in my heart, and I think even the Speaker of the House said this, he doesn't believe that the death penalty reflects Ohio's values any longer. And so, as Hannah mentioned, we started the Ohio Conservatives Concerned Against the Death Penalty chapter. And I actually had an opportunity to, I know a lot of the folks on there, recruited a lot of the folks that are part of this. And we have a very good bipartisan, across the board, kind of across the spectrum team, that in the thing with the death penalty, it doesn't matter what gets you there, it's that it gets you there, right? As far as why you want it repealed. It can be faith, it can be cost, it can be the racial inequity of it, it can be innocence, it can be, your distrust of government. Any of those reasons matter. And that's, this is what we've kind of created, is this all accepting how, it doesn't matter how you got here, you're here, let's repeal this thing. And just one real quick on Just Mercy, had the opportunity to go to a showing of it earlier this year. And it was as emotional a piece of cinema as I've ever seen. And it didn't, I was already there as far as a repeal, but it strengthened my resolve to fight the fight, and to convince others. And I've been telling everybody that will listen, my conservative and libertarian friends, they have to watch this movie, because if you watch it, and it will change you, or it will further your resolve. And so for me, it'll stick with me always, that story will. And the story that Kwame told, those things will stick with somebody. And this, Jocelyn and Hannah, thank you for the invite to be a part of this. I'm excited. We will repeal the death penalty in the next couple of years. It will happen. I'm absolutely convinced of it. We just got to put our shoulder to the grindstone and keep fighting and keep pushing up that hill, and it will happen. With that, I want to turn it over to Tyra Patterson to tell her story.
Thank you. Thank you for having a change of heart. It's so important. Thank you, Kwame, for sharing your story. It's so touching, had me emotional. Thank you. My name is Tyra Patterson, and I served 23 years on a wrongful conviction, and it was for aggravated murder and 5 counts of aggravated robbery. Although being sentenced to 43 years to life at a young age for a crime I didn't commit, it wasn't the same, and it is not the same as a death sentence. So it's different. I want to make it clear. I want to completely make it clear that being in a maximum security prison, you become close to people who are on death row, just as Kwame talked about, because we, as women, we have only 3 prisons. So if you're sentenced to life in prison, you automatically are placed in the proximity of people who are on death row. And right now we only have 1 woman. And because I had illnesses, I had the privilege, and I'm gonna say the privilege, to live with her. And I was the only woman on death row with her for years. And to see her and to get to know her and to humanize her the way we have done with Mr. Richardson is unexplainable. I remember when she had to walk only a few feet to get her hair cut, and she had to be shackled with her wrists and her ankles just for a haircut. And I remember people whispering, not humanizing her. So it was different for me. I can't imagine being on death row, but when people take another person's life into their own hands and decide to do what they want and allow that one mistake to become their whole entire sentence, it's not okay. The moment that she arrived, I remember the moment that she arrived, she was ostracized, and not just from the community, but from the prison within itself. She was placed on a 23-hour lockdown. I know they're placed on a 23-hour lockdown for not violating any rule infractions, but just because of her case, But I can't, I don't know. I didn't realize this was going to be so emotional for me to talk about her or to hear Kwame's case. But it's being sentenced to life in prison is like a death sentence. And I don't want to, and the reason why I'm in this space is because I don't ever want to take Kwame's situation or those who are on death row, because I have a chance today to redeem myself. And if we don't work for the humanity of somebody on death row, they will never have a chance to redeem themselves. And especially if they are innocent, as Kwame was and is. There's so many people will we ever know if somebody has done that. And I don't know, it's just, I'm so sorry. I'm just so sorry. My thoughts, I have some thoughts about, the jury's death penalty. That means the subject to racial bias and how the juries pick and choose. The culture competencies that I want to talk about a little bit about, how do people understand people emotional abuse that they go through before they are before they are in prison, and how somebody have that privileged life? Do they really understand? Do they really understand what that person had went through? I don't know why this is so emotional for me. I was prepared for this. I was really prepared for this, but well, I'll answer questions at the end. I was prepared for this.
Okay, I believe that Senator Nikki Antonio has joined us, and we are going to unmute you so you can provide some comments. I really appreciate Tyra and Kwame sharing stories and Hannah and Mike framing the issue for us. And I would like to give Senator Antonio a few minutes to provide remarks before we kick it to Q&A.
Thank you. Thanks so much for inviting me to be here for a few minutes today. And I really appreciate Tyra. I didn't hear all of what you were talking about, but I heard you at the end. And this is so hard because for me as a legislator, it's really difficult too, because there are so few options for us right now. So I really hear what you're saying about life without parole, that it might as well be a death sentence. What I do know though, is that if someone is given the death sentence, and if Ohio decides to go ahead, follow through with executions, there's no going back and there's no way back. And so we're in this horrible situation right now. Sometimes people talk about how they're maybe experience the best of both worlds. Well, we're in a situation where it's the worst, I think, of both worlds. We have, and I continue to introduce legislation. I've been in the legislature for 10 years now, and every General Assembly I've introduced the work to end the use of the death penalty, and to go to life without parole as an alternative to a capital crime. Narrow, though. Do we have DNA evidence? Are we sure this is the person? Are we beyond a shadow of a doubt, absolutely, positively, this is the person who's committed this crime? But then my belief is that the state of Ohio should not be in the business of ending people's lives. And so I have worked for us to, a big part of it is education, always, about a topic that is so difficult for some people within a system that needs so much overhaul and so much reworking, because it's not working for a lot of people. It's certainly not working for people of color, minority communities, for sure. I recently introduced legislation, we got passed out of the Senate, to limit shackling of pregnant prisoners. Now, this is barbaric. This is a barbaric practice, but it's based on the fact that all the rules in prison were created initially for men. No one thought about someone being a prisoner and also being pregnant. And so when they started increasing incarcerating women, they just put the rules on to apply like they would for men. And the reason why I bring that up in this context is because so much of our criminal justice system is created in this punitive, almost like a vacuum. It hasn't kept up. It hasn't advanced as we maybe hopefully as a society have advanced. And so we find ourselves in these places with these archaic, barbaric kinds of practices when it comes to incarceration. And way, way too many people incarcerated, disproportionately, again, people of color, low-income people, being the ones that are in prison more than anything else. And so every time we introduce this bill, every time we have a conversation, and this is one of the first times that not only do I have bipartisan sponsorship of the bill, but I also have some folks on both sides of the aisle as co-sponsors of the bill. It lends itself to the opportunity to have these discussions and have discussion. And that's probably been the most powerful thing about introducing legislation, is that we get to have a conversation. We get to have Justice Pfeiffer come in and talk about how at one point he was the person bringing back the death penalty, and now he realizes that that was a gross mistake. I never forget that he was quoted as saying that the death penalty in the state of Ohio is a death lottery, and that so often it's about chance rather than what crime has been committed by somebody. And we know because of exonerees that there's no perfect science in actually making sure that the person who is in jail for a crime is actually the person that committed the crime. So for all of those reasons, and continuing to have, do the work and continuing to have the conversation, I think it's so important. We've worked with many of the advocacy groups to be able to try to time when we were doing this work, knowing that we were trying to strategize, if you will. Hannah, we've talked and we've certainly worked on, could we possibly pass legislation for the, to deal with mental health, severely mental health, those people that have severe mental health issues? Would we be able to take that step in the right direction? We worked on that for a long time. It's still being worked on. But we also knew that we had to introduce this legislation as well. The bill is Senate Bill 296. And my joint sponsor on the bill is Christina Rogner, and Peggy Lehner are also from across the aisle. And so my hope is, and we were started down the road of having those conversations and really talking to people, because part of the shift, if we're going to get a societal shift in how they even look at capital punishment, it begins with having that concrete piece of legislation to use as the point, as the conversation starter, if you will. Amazing, amazing work has been done on, and I can't think of the number of the bill, but the serious mental illness bill that I've also been a joint sponsor in both the House and the Senate on. Worked with Bill Seitz in the House. Now it's back in the Senate to try to pass that bill. Every single time we just got closer, and we got more people that understood, more legislators who were willing to even shift how they think about capital punishment. That's an incredible milestone. That is amazing work, because what you're talking about is people who have spent their whole lives just automatically saying, oh, capital punishment, of course, of course, of course. We should just execute people. That's what we should do. So just the shift that's happening is because of all the work that all of you are doing and will continue to do. And I just appreciate so much the fact that I'm able to be a part of it as we go forward, because ultimately, not only do I not want to see us executing people, I would like to see the whole system, the whole criminal justice system overturned, redone, revamped. There is no reason to have all of these people locked up. And my hope is that maybe we're cracking something open right now in society, and that we have this moment and this opportunity to get people to think about this differently. And with that, I'm going to stop. And thank you so much for allowing me to be included in this conversation. And all of the work that all of you are doing is much appreciated as we go forward. We're going to do it too. We're going to end this. I believe it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Everyone, I know you can't join me in a verbal or audible round of applause, but you can actually hit the clapping reaction at the bottom of the screen. So everybody, please join me in a round of applause for all of our speakers and presenters today. Thank you so much, everyone, for all of the advocacy, tremendous work that you are doing, and the vulnerability of sharing stories with us. I also am a true believer that change is on the way. And I'm also happy to say that we got an incredible amount of wonderful questions in the chat box, and we have been taking note of those. We have about 20 minutes. So I would like to start pitching some questions to see how many we can get through, and then we will wrap up today's program with some action steps. So I'm going to start with a question for both Kwame and Tyra. We received many similar questions from our participants, Aaron, Aubrey, Teresa, and Sydney. They all want to know, what gave you guys hope that justice would eventually be served? How did you keep going in the face of injustice? So can we start with Kwame, and then can you kick it to Tyra?
Certainly. Thank you, first of all, for that question. This is an interesting question there. So I have to go all the way back to that 17-year-old kid. I was tried, sentenced, and convicted and sentenced to die all before my 18th birthday. So at 18, October 25th, I was in my cell a week before Halloween, which was something that 17-year-old kids believed in back then. But now I have to put all of this aside and become a man like that, right? So education was the key for me. I would utilize education for the next 26 years of my life doing that incarceration. I would go on to become the administrative clerk of the education department for 21 years. I would educate over 6,000 men in the system. I would put into place the NAACP. And so in the course of doing this inside of this organization, this institution, I began to realize that I had not been put into this position because, as anyone would obviously see, I was poor, Black, and disheveled, but also because of the disenfranchisement, the redlining, and the mere fact that somewhere always a rose has to grow up out of this hardened concrete. This rose was me. I was placed in this situation that I could be here today and deliver this message and tell you that the world has to stop. The world has to realize that the capitalistic place in the whole wide world was over in where? In the Colosseums of Rome, where they would throw people to death just to have an event. Has stopped doing that. And so here in America and around the world, we have to stop participating in the worst barbaric thing known to human beings. And that is putting another man, another woman, another human being to death. We have to stop the practice of taking human beings and isolating them from the others. This is why you have PTSD and all of the harsh mental disparities that Senator Antonio was just speaking about. We have to be men and women grown and adult about the things that we have made the mistakes about, and realize that no man, no woman, no human being should be sentenced to die. And those are my words, those are my beliefs, and this is how my hope got me to fester and prosper all the things that has happened today. And I want to thank you for allowing me to say those things to you. I really do.
Thank you, Kwame, again. I think you got to me. So what kept me hopeful is a lot of, I tell a lot of people when I went to prison at such a young age, I didn't know how to read or write. So I made education, while incarcerated, I made prison my education. So I learned how to be somebody else's voice, the advocating in prison, changing their rules and violations. I advocated for that. And I knew that I wanted to become a better person and change the system and the conversation. So I wanted to be so I could be at the table today. So I most definitely would have to say when people leverage their privilege for me, now I'm able to do the same thing. So I wanted to remain hopeful, and that's exactly what I did. Let's see, what else kept me hopeful? People changing policies and procedures, people caring about me, people humanizing me. And I think that was the key point. When people came to visit me, people were able to see people for who they were. Just like when Just Mercy, we were able to see Mr. Richardson for who he was and as a human being. Kwame, we were able to see you. I know we weren't able to see you at the age of 17, but however, if people today was in those rooms with you, I am sure that things would have changed then. So that's what kept me hopeful. And what keeps me hopeful today is knowing that we can be at the table. Our voices matter today, and it's important to have those directly impacted here. So that keeps me hopeful. And Kwame, stop making me cry, please. Okay.
You guys are both gonna make me cry. Thank you both for being at the table and for being in this fight and for sharing with us. It's so appreciated and so needed, and we're gonna get there. We're gonna make the change that we wanna see in the system. We have many questions for all of our speakers, so I'm gonna try to get through at least one or two rotations for everybody. Mike, I'd like to kick it to you. A couple of folks were wondering what it was like to recruit other conservatives to join the team, to join the movement, so to speak. What kind of reactions did you get, and what really pulled in conservatives to this fight?
Thank you, Jocelyn. Yeah, I saw that. I don't listen to direction well, evidently. I started trying to answer in the chat box, so I apologize. But yeah, I saw those questions. So I will say initially the reaction was surprise because it was me asking. I think my position was pretty well known by what I had done in my career, and I think they just thought that assumption was still accurate. And so when I came to them and started talking to them about the death penalty and the repeal of it, they were taken aback. And it's been and I think one of the questions, I know there's a couple of them that are kind of similar. What did they respond to? And I think it's interesting because a number of the conversations I've had, and even in the meetings that Hannah Kubbins and I have had with legislators, is that people that I've worked with as fellow operatives and such through the 2 decades plus, they're like, oh yeah, I'm against it, and they have different reasons. A lot of it would be faith. I'd say predominantly that was the reason, but I have a number of libertarian friends who don't trust the government as far as you can throw it, and so therefore they don't believe that government should be in this business. And through that, it was very interesting. And I'll give you an example. The conversation I had with former Congressman Pat Teaberry is a very dear friend of mine. Happened to be actually when Hannah Kubbins and myself and another national advocate were walking to a meeting, happened to see him, and I introduced them, and he's like, oh, good, keep up the good work. And my antennas went off. I'm like, gotcha. And so scheduled a conversation with him, and he told me that he was as a state rep back in the late 90s, he was an advocate for the death penalty. I don't say an advocate, a supporter of the death penalty. But over time, as he was in Congress and his strong Catholic faith, he changed in conversations with friends. So it is you know, when I talk in my talk, it comes from all different directions, and you know, some of it's innocence and you know, whatever, racial inequality, it comes from everywhere, even among conservatives. So I hope that kind of answered your question.
Thanks, Mike.
And thank you.
So the next question is legislative in nature. We've had a couple of folks who are wondering if there's any chance the legislature will pass the serious mental illness bill this year, or if maybe they'll punt, seeing that there might be a repeal bill in the next General Assembly that starts in January of next year. And what can people do to help move these bills now or in the future? So I'm wondering if Senator Antonio and Hannah, if you want to speak to the legislative side and how people can help.
Sure. I'll go first, and then I'll let Hannah top off after that. I really appreciate what Mike was just saying, because the way forward in a lot of this work has been those conversations, having lunch with a colleague where we talk about things. The colleagues that are with me from across the aisle, so Republican legislators right now who have signed on to the bill, have talked at great length about the reason why they have changed their minds, changed their thoughts about capital punishment and the death penalty is because of their faith. And we have been able to talk one-on-one, have those conversations. Certainly they're having them with other folks in their lives, but when all is said and done, that's how things change, right? It's one person and another person and those personal conversations. So for all the people on this call who are having those personal conversations with the people around them, whether they're within their circle of family and friends or outside of, when they get the opportunity to do that, know that every conversation you have could be that one spark that tips someone over to the other side of how they think about this. And each small step that we take is powerful. Having said that, that also means phone calls, letters, emails, especially handwritten letters. I have to say, we look at those. Our staff not only read them, many times they bring them to us as legislators and say, you probably want to take a look at this. Here's a letter someone took the time to write. Someone typed a letter and printed it and sent it and signed their name, but then they put something on and it's personal, it's from the heart. That's the communication that makes such a difference for us. So the people to contact, as far as I'm concerned, in the Senate are certainly the Senate President, the chair of the Judiciary Committee, where the bill is right now, and has yet to have a hearing. It needs to have hearings. And then I'll let Hannah talk a little bit about where the situation is with the serious mental illness right now, Bill. But what I can tell you going forward is no matter what happens in this General Assembly, and hopefully we anticipate lame duck, which is right at the end of the year, is going to be wild. It always is, but we think it's going to be really wild this year. Part of the reason because we've been so delayed in having as many sessions as we need to have because of COVID. So could something happen in lame duck where we pass both of these bills? Anything's possible. Could we come back next General Assembly and people have a new commitment and a new encouragement to be able to do this? That's also possible. I truly believe that one way or the other, we are closer to ending this thing than we've ever been in the state of Ohio. So all of your work matters, those conversations, the phone calls. And the last thing I'll say is, you know, right now with COVID, one of the things that's happening, people are answering their phones. Mm-hmm. If you can contact directly, and Hannah can help with some of this, or get a small group to set up a meeting virtually, but to call a legislator and talk to them. They're available more now probably than ever before. Hannah, what do you think? I'll send it over to you.
Yeah, I think you covered most of the things I wanted to mention, but specifically speaking to the SMI bill, I mean, I think it's been in the GA for years now, 5 or 6 years it's been going through. And it did get voted out of Senate Judiciary, and it's now in Rules, I believe. And please correct me if I'm misspeaking, but that's the committee that decides when something goes to the floor for a vote. And I've been told to not really hold my breath on that. I think the senator is absolutely right. Anything can happen in lame duck, so we'll see in the fall. But I do think something that the SMI bill has done over the last few years, along with it being a great bill, is in committee hearings, you know, there will be comments about, well, you know, if we have this law enacted, is that going to add more time to like litigate this case, and will that cause more pain for the people who have lost their loved one to murder? And so that conversation started to happen with legislators in that committee, and talking about, well, why do we even have this? It's harming so many people already. It's not solving anything. Why have it at all? So I will say that it's been great to see those conversations happening. But I think you covered all the bases. I'm going to put my email in the chat box, and then I think Jocelyn's going to send a follow-up email on ways to get involved, as you mentioned, in setting up meetings with legislators. I'm your girl for that. Happy to help. So I will put that in the box.
Great. Thank you both so much. We have several more questions and are running short on time, so I am going to blend a few of them so we can hear from Kwame and Tyra one more time. Folks want to know what your advocacy work looks like. Can they help you? And they also want to know what keeps you going, what inspires you to stay in the fight right now.
So you can go first, Tyra. I'll wait.
As you all know, I work for Ohio Justice and Policy Center, and what we do is quite the opposite of the Innocence Project. We represent those who are actually guilty. For people like me and Kwame, for so many years, we were deemed guilty while we were inside the institution. So somebody had to come in and fight for our rights. Somebody had to come in to make sure that our health necessities were being met, and that we had hot meals, or that the guards wasn't raping us or whatnot. However, it kept us mentally sane. So what I do today is something I love to do. I love to know that somebody can come inside the institution and fight for our rights, whether we have made a mistake or not. I think it's important. I know a lot of people fight for those who are innocent to not be on death row, but a lot of people are put to death even when they made not even the mistakes that should have put them on death row in the first place. So that keeps me hopeful. Oh my goodness, so many things. Creating opportunities for people who are incarcerated, people who are coming home, the menial jobs that are offered to us. When we come home, they expect us to go to the kitchens and construction sites. I create opportunities for people who have equal pay, better job opportunities. So I don't know, that keeps me hopeful.
Okay, thank you for that. I guess it's my turn as soon as I get switched over there, but you guys can still hear me, right?
You're good.
Yeah, so what I want to say is that aside from all of the general and everyday practices of death penalty advocacy, witnessing innocence is hands-on and foot on the ground everywhere. But my most pride and joy right now in 2020 is that we have what we call an advocacy and justice program and workshop. And this allows us with this accuracy and justice program and workshop to go into every city, state, and municipality and dialogue with the prosecutions. And this has come over as a great, really big thing. We've got rave reviews about it. Everywhere we go, they want us to come back because two things happen there. First of all, it's never been happened before. The prosecution has never had a chance, or the defense, to dialogue back and forth, except for in the courtroom when they're pointing fingers. So this gives, opens up the conversation and gives the opportunity to see where mistakes and wrongful incarceration, prosecutorial misconduct, and that real smooth one that the cops do is put in check. So we've been working real hard at that, and I'm very, very proud that this is a success for the organization and continues to be. So I just did 2 seminars just the other day in Colorado by way of, virtuality. But this is something that goes on with Witness to Innocence, and it is very prominent in our organization. I'm so proud of it, and it works. What gives me the hope and the drive to keep on is, like I said, I always look back at that 17-year-old kid that didn't have an opportunity to voice his concerns. They didn't have anyone to speak for him, and didn't have no knowledge of what was going on with the vastness of the incarceration that was going on with it. If we can stop capital punishment, that would be the extremities of my hopes and desires. However, I look at life without parole also as a slow means of death. And to have that implemented, aside from capital punishment, is one thing, but to have that implemented righteously, as with capital punishment, we must be sure that these men and women are indeed guilty in order to give them life without parole. For that would be just like sentence a man or woman to die, had we been wrong on that. So we got to make sure that's right too, and I would support that bill as well. But right now, it's kind of up for grabs. We're going to stop killing folks. That's what I want to do. I love you all. I'm so glad you had me here. Anytime you want me back, dial my number and I'll be there, because that's what I do.
Thank you so much. Tyra, Hannah, Senator Antonio, Mike, thank you so much for being our wonderful panelists today. We really appreciate you sharing your time, your stories, and your knowledge and insights with us. I just want to know that you're not in this fight alone. We're a small and growing mighty team that is going to end the death penalty in the state of Ohio once and for all. I believe it. I think all of us on the panel believe it, but we can't do it without you, and we need your support. And that really starts with conversation. So I want to make a couple of asks in closing for today's programs. If you already watched the movie Just Mercy, I would like to encourage you to share the movie with your family and friends, to start a dialogue, engage in a conversation, have those tough conversations, not just the easy ones. Talk about the real human impact and the cost of the death penalty for people across our state and across the nation. And if you haven't watched Just Mercy yet, but you tuned in to hear from us today, I would encourage you to make a commitment that you will watch it this weekend. Do a safe virtual screening with a family member or a friend or somebody else in your household, so that you can be informed and get that conversation going. We have many ways for you to get involved and engaged in the fight with us to repeal the death penalty, and we will be following up with an email that's going to explain exactly how you can engage with all of the organizations hosting today, how you can engage on the current legislation that is in the Ohio General Assembly, and everything in between. So please do be on the lookout for a follow-up email from us. We did a pretty good job getting through the questions, but I will review them to see if there's anything that's lingering. And you have my word that we will do our best to get responses to you. So with that, thank you so much for taking the time out of your evening to engage in this dialogue with us, and I hope you have a wonderful night.
Thank you for having us.